Being consistent will require discipline and fierce determination to succeed. And you got to make those things second nature. Remember the study we talked about with the astronauts. The reality is it takes 25 to 30 days to carve these new neural pathways to make the things you want to do second nature, to make them a habit. It's a good idea to put your prosperity plan in places you'll always see it. On your bathroom mirror, on your coffee maker, or as a daily reminder on your phone. Put it where you can't miss it to help resist the gravitational pull of the old routine. Remember, the conundrum of human nature. Your initial excitement will fade. You've got to make sure that you stay focused. Don't shelve the new ideas in favor of what's comfortable. Implement and generate sustainable improvements in your life. Now, there will be moments when you have these feelings of uncertainty and feeling overwhelmed. When that happens, here's a few tips. Ask yourself, how badly do I want it? Do you want it just a little bit, or do you want it this much? You'll do whatever you have to do. You'll do whatever you have to do to have the things you want. You have to want it so bad that you'll do whatever you have to do to reach your dreams. This will strengthen you and reinforce your resolve. You've got to be unfazed and undaunted by obstacles. They're going to happen, but you've got to stay focused anyway. I want to share with you a story that kind of sums up everything we've talked about in terms of putting good things in the box and pulling good things out of the box. In 2002, I was a year away from getting out of prison. This was 6 years after my dad died. 6 years after I wrote that list out and stuck it to the wall of my cell with toothpaste. 6 years after I began reprogramming my subconscious mind. I was in the cell house one day and the prison guard came walking by. Just as he walked past me, he fell down. First, I thought he tripped or something, so I turned around to check him out, and next thing I know, this guy's lying there on the floor having some kind of seizure. I didn't know what to do. Now, the first thought that went through my mind in a split nanosecond was, it sucks to be you, because the number one lesson, the number one rule in the penitentiary is very simple. The police are not your friends. You don't help the police, you don't talk to the police except for when you have to. So I'm watching this guy struggle, obviously having some kind of medical emergency, and several other people were standing around watching him too. So I had to reach in that box and make a decision, just like we all do every day. We reach in the box making decisions all day long. So I reached in, but instead of pulling out, hey, I'm a convict, you're a cop, you're screwed, I reached in that box and I pulled out what I've been telling myself every morning for 6 years. I'm a man of honor, character, and integrity. I had to help this cop. So I kneel down over Mark McClure, this young cop, and not knowing what to do, I'm trying to grab him because he's having this seizure. I'm just trying to stabilize him because he's knocking himself in the head. Just as I get my hands around his wrists and his forearms, all of a sudden, like somebody turned a light switch off, this dude was gone. I don't know if he had a stroke or if he had a heart attack or some kind of, brain aneurysm, but all of a sudden he was violently struggling and just froze and collapsed. He was dead as a doornail. All of a sudden I realized, wow, this dude just died right in front of me. So I start thinking, what am I going to do? I've got to do something. So I realized I have to do CPR, right? Problem was I didn't know the first thing about CPR. As I often tell people, the only thing I knew about CPR at that time was what I'd seen on Baywatch in slow motion. So I asked myself, what should I do? So I remember they start pumping on the chest. So I start pumping on dude's chest. Bam, 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 nothing happens. Hit the chest again. Bam, bam, nothing happens. Then I realized if I'm going to get some oxygen into this dude's bloodstream, I got to put this mouth on that mouth. So I take a deep breath. I put my mouth over his. I could taste the Dr. Pepper that he'd been drinking when he fell down. It was all I could do not to gag right there on the guy. But I knew I was his only hope. And so I breathed. But nothing happened. I breathed again, but nothing happened. I pumped on the chest some more, nothing happened. 2 or 3 minutes go by, this guy is dead as a doornail. After a few minutes, I hear the police coming. Someone had finally run to go get some help, and a bunch of cops bum rush the unit, and there's a bunch of screaming going on. They're locking the cell house down. One of the cops comes and kneels down next to me. He knew how to do CPR. So he tells me, you've got to pinch the nose and tilt the head back, open up the airway. So I pinch the nose, I tilt his head back, he opens up the airway, and I breathe. Then the cop gets on him and starts doing the chest compressions. He tells me to breathe again. I breathe a few times again. And before you know it, we start getting this rhythm going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. After about another 2 or 3 minutes, all of a sudden, just as fast as this dude left, he came back to life with a vengeance. And naturally, he came to life at the very moment, of course, that my mouth was right on his mouth. I'm sitting there giving the guy mouth to mouth. I see out of the corner of my eyes, his eyes open up, and all he sees is a convict in khakis on him. So he doesn't know what's going on, so he just comes up and starts swinging. So I start backing away as fast as I can. One of the cops steps in and says, hey, you're okay, you're okay. And they get the guy out. They just pick him up, throw him over one of the cop's shoulders. They get him to the hospital, and the guy makes a full recovery. Come to find out that his heart had stopped beating and just had some kind of reaction to some medication he was taking, a very serious situation, and he nearly died. The crazy thing is about 2 weeks after that incident, I got a letter from the warden. And in the letter, he went on to thank me for helping this cop and for doing the right thing. And then he closed the letter and he said that my willingness to extend myself to this cop was testament of my good character and a reflection of my person. Now, what was so amazing is that the warden used the word character, the same exact word I had written on a sheet of paper 6 years earlier. I'm a man of honor, character, and integrity. You see, folks, when you put good things in the box every day, sooner or later, push comes to shove. When emotions are high, you're going to reach in that box and make decisions. You got to make sure you're reaching in that box and pulling out what you put in there this morning, not something somebody else put in there 20 or 30 years ago. You have to make sure the things in your box today are consistent with who you want to be today. A year later, I got out of prison, and in January of 2003, I'm at that halfway house, a 39-year-old, 3-time convicted felon, a 9th grade high school dropout, but I was excited about my life. I had the prosperity mindset. I had studied sales. I had studied business from the masters, Tom Hopkins and Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins, all the great thinkers and writers. And I went out there and I started to build my life, building my dream, building everything I wanted to do. My number one goal was to get a place to live so I could get my son. To do that, I had to get a job. So in January of 2003, in the wintertime in Colorado, without a dime to my name, 2 suits of clothing, no car, no nothing, I set out to build my fortune. I would go out every morning knocking on doors. I had a little spiel I would do. I'd walk in, I'd say, "How do you do? I'm Weldon Long. I just need one job, one shot, one opportunity." People would look at me and say, "Hey, man, we need some great attitudes like that around here." Then, of course, I'd have to tell them, well, there's a little more to the story. I spent 13 years in prison, and et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, people were turned off by that. Thanks, but no thanks, pal. So it was hard to get a job. This went on for months and months and months. Finally, in April of 2003, I walk in this company, and this guy's looking for a salesman. I introduced myself. I gave him my spiel, and I said, well, now there's more to the story. I went to prison. I told him the whole story, and he looks at me and says, "You know what? I think you're a changed man." I said, "Man, that's what I've been trying to tell folks for 4 months. I'm not the same dude as that dude on paper. I've changed my life. I've changed who I am." And so he starts talking to me like about maybe he's going to give me a job. And he walks out of his office for a few minutes. He comes back and has a sheet of paper and a pencil. He says, "I want you to write down when you went to prison, what you went to prison for. Just write it all down. I'm going to take this down to human resources, see if we can find a spot for you." Couldn't believe it. Finally, it was happening. So he takes the list, and he's gone for about 10 minutes. He comes walking back in the door, and when he walked in the room, I could see the disappointment on his face. He looked at me and he said, "Mr. Long," and I said, "Stop right there. Whatever you say next, don't let it be the word no. I need this job in ways you cannot even imagine. I need this opportunity more than I can ever describe to you." He says, "Man, if it was up to me, the answer would be yes, but human resources said, there's just no way with your record that we can hire you here." So he sat down behind his desk, and I sat down across from his desk. And then he looked at me from across the desk, and he said the words that pierced me like an arrow. He looked at me, he says, "What are you going to do?" And it was the pity in his voice that got to me. I said, "What do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to get me a job. I'm going to get the place to live. I'm going to find my boy. I'm going to get my son. I'm going to raise my son." I said, "If you have a job, I want it. You have an opportunity, I'll take it. But don't feel sorry for me, man. This is not the worst day I've had in a long time, I promise you." So I walked out of his office. I got in the elevator. I went down to the bottom floor, and I walked out. I looked at my watch. It was 4:45 p.m. I know exactly what time it was because I had about a half a mile walk back to the bus stop, and I knew the bus came about 5 o'clock. Now, it was critically important I got the 5 o'clock bus because I had a 6 p.m. curfew at the halfway house. And if you're late, past the curfew, it's automatic going to jail. It's kind of like going AWOL in the military. And so they call it technical escape. It's a new felony, and they send you back to jail just like that. If you're 1 or 2 minutes late. So I was always very careful to be on time. So I'm walking the half a mile to the bus stop, and with every step, I'm getting angry and angry and angry because I'm thinking about that guy in the building that felt sorry for me. And then I realized I wasn't so much angry as I was scared. For the first time, after 4 months of being out, I was actually afraid that I might not make it. What happens if I can't get a job? What happens if I can't find a way to make a living and can't get a place to live? I can't get my son. So I get the half a mile walk to the bus stop, and I'm sitting there, and I look back down at my watch, and I realize now the bus is late. Now, again, if the bus is late, I get back to the halfway house late. I got bigger problems than not having a job because I'm going straight back to jail, and I'm tired of jail at that point. I ain't trying to go to jail ever again. And so I'm sitting there, and I start panicking. All the old tapes start playing, right? Who did you think you were kidding? To come out here and be Joe Civilian, good guy, after 13 years in the penitentiary. And then I don't know if I should start trying to run across town to get there by 6, or maybe I should just wait. I started getting confused and overwhelmed by just the stress of all of it. Finally, about 5:20, I see the bus coming. He pulls up to the bus stop. I hop on the bus, and I'm like, "Dude, where you been?" Bus driver looks at me and says, I've been working. Where you been? I said, I've been sitting there on that bench waiting for you. You're late. You're almost 25 minutes late. He says, what are you talking about? I'm right on time. He grabs the schedule, he throws it at me, and I open the schedule, and I had misread the schedule. Again, it was on me. I caused this situation. I permitted this situation. I allowed this situation. If I'm going to jail today, it's because of the situation that I put myself into. If it is to be, it's up to me. So I sit down at the bus, and I'm just kind of biding my time as I go across town, knowing I'm going to be maybe right on time, maybe a couple of minutes late. I wasn't for sure, just depending on traffic. So he finally gets to the bus stop a few blocks away from the halfway house. He opens the door, and I tear out of the bus. I'm running down the street. I got nothing but one of my 2 sets of clothing on. I had an empty briefcase, nothing in it, but it made me look like I had something going on. So I'm running down the street. I run in the halfway house in the office where all the cops are, and I bang on the window. I'm like, yo, Long, check me in, check me in. One of the cops looks at me and gives me a little head nod. And they grab my file, the sheet of paper, kind of like a time clock. They put it in there and chunk. And he slides it back under the glass for me to sign. It's 5:58 p.m. I had nothing but time. I'm not going to jail tonight. So I walked out of the office. I went back to the room I shared with about 8 other guys in my situation. And then I started thinking about the guy in the building again. I got so distracted thinking I was going to jail, I forgot I couldn't get a job. Now that I wasn't going to jail, I started thinking about, I couldn't get a job again. So I get back to my room, and I'm sitting there, and all the old anxieties, all the stress, and then all of a sudden it hits me. This voice in my head that I've heard 1,000 times. How bad do you want it? How bad do you want this life? How bad do you want to be a father to that son? Do you want it this bad that you'll do it if it's not too much trouble? Or do you want it this bad that you'll do whatever you have to do to be successful? And I reminded myself, I want this bad. So the next morning I got up, I kind of dusted the cobwebs off of my head, went out, started knocking on doors. How do you do? I'm Weldon Long. Just need one shot, one job, one opportunity. I'll never lie, cheat, or steal. I just need a shot. So April turns into May. May turns into June. At least it's not cold anymore, right? I'm not walking around the snow. And finally, in the last week of June, I walked into a little heating and air conditioning company, and I gave my spiel, and a guy offered me a job. I went out my very first month in July of 2003, and I sold $149,000 of air conditioners. I made myself over $13,000 in sales commissions. You can believe it changed my life, and I will promise you this, the sales career, the sales industry saved my life. Without a job in sales, what else was I going to do? And not only was it a job, it was financial security, it was wealth, it was prosperity. I worked there for about a year, eventually opened my own company, and you kind of know the rest of the story from there. The bottom line is that you have to want it really bad. There will be times where it's difficult. There will be times where you're at that crossroads. Can I do it? Is it worth the effort? Is it worth all the time I need? Yes, it is. Every ounce of effort, it's worth all of it. Because the prosperity, the wealth, the happiness, it's all right there for our taking. Listen, Henry David Thoreau said, if we advance confidently in the directions of our dreams and endeavor to live the life that we have imagined, we will meet with success unexpected in common hours. And folks, I'm telling you, that's not just a bunch of fancy words, that's a promise. You see, in my mind, success was not unexpected because I saw it, I put it in my box, and over the years, through a million choices, attitudes, and beliefs, I pulled this new life out of my box. You see, I'm an average guy living an extraordinary life. As a result of learning and implementing these simple ideas, the power of consistency changed everything in my life and in my business. Your thoughts trigger your emotions trigger your actions, and of course your actions create your results. It's not rocket science, folks. Stay focused, never surrender. Success is closer than you think.